Hello and welcome back to the Mind and Money podcast. I'm Sherry, a financial coach, and today I'm excited to welcome Julie. And we are going to talk about how we can bring joy into our lives in all aspects and how that can shift our goals and our perception of everything. And I'm very excited to see where this conversation goes. But first, I'd like to take a minute for Julie for you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Sherry. So I'm Julie Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I live in the mountains of North Carolina near Asheville. I love being outside, doing stuff with my husband and my two cats who bring lots of joy into my life. So that feels kind of appropriate as we move into this whole section on joy.
Yeah. Like I said, excited to hear where this conversation goes, but kind of what was the first thing that brought you more focused on looking for joy? Is there something specific that happened, or kind of how did that come to you?
I'm just laughing. That's such a good question. And I'm wondering, as you asked that, if you remembered when this came up, but it was honestly in November. I had planned to do a podcast, a personal talk I work a lot with moral injury. That's like my big project that I do. And so I do personal talks around my moral injury sustained in Iraq. So I was going to do a podcast on that, a personal talk on that, a CE that I developed for clinicians on that, and somehow launch this group for clinicians to work on their moral injury in 1 month. And that was insane. And luckily, I kind of backed off from that. But then even the things that I was able to do, I just was getting more and more stressed out. I was having illness. I was having these massive headaches. And in all this process, something finally clicked on, even though I was doing this work that I loved, that the mental model, the mental mindset was one of what I have termed mission first. That was not sustainable. That was not aligned with my values. And so from there, developed this what I call Joy First protocol that we're going to talk about today.
Yes. Yeah. And there's so much noise on social media these days. And it's been like that for as long as I've been on social media, promoting the hustle culture and the do this. And we have to, and as entrepreneurs, especially as entrepreneurs with ADHD, we tend to then want to do all of the things. Oh, this person's doing this and they're getting success. This person's doing this. I should do this. I should do this. And we keep adding to our plates. And that is a recipe for disaster in so many ways. So tell us a little bit about what your Joy First mission means. What is the broader idea and things that are within it, and how is it impacting you personally?
Sure. So you brought up a really good point especially around ADHD brains and how we want to do all the things, right? And then the culture piece of doing all the things. So even a bigger step here with this mission first mindset, I started calling it operating system. I don't like that because we're not machines. So we'll call it mindset. So mission first is a lot of times happens with people who work in fields where there's like a commitment to something larger than them. Right? So the medical fields, firefighters, police officers, veterans, child protective services, anything like that, where you're helping humans a lot of times, you're connected to something that's bigger than yourself. There's often a very strong work ethic. And then there is this kind of almost like a selflessness around that, like this selfless service. And so you start out in this way, but then these types of jobs like kind of confirm that kind of way. Like, this is what we're doing. We have to care. And a lot of times it's like even morally tethered, right? Like, this is such an important thing to care for another human, to do this. So it really gets embedded in there. And then if you're always focused on the other, of like, I have to do this for these people, then when you hear the word self-care, the word self, like the resistance is so deeply internal to that. Like, how could I do that if my whole thing is taking care of others? Doesn't work. So then let's throw the ADHD piece in, right? I think that a lot of times the ADHD folks were also always trying to make up for a sense of lack.
Yes.
So we're always trying to make up for this, always. So continually pushing, right? Continually pushing, trying to make up for something that we never should have to freaking make up for, but is in there. So there's that. And then there's just this obligation piece that can come in from families. And that's what we talked about in that burnout episode before, was this, voices, right? Whose voice is telling me to do this? A lot of times it's family, it's culture. So there's obligation of I have to do these things. And so anytime the word self-care or whatever comes up in there, we're resistant to it. But what's really problematic, and this is where burnout comes in, is that we might actually do the self-care things, right? We might go get the massage. We might go on the vacation or buy the thing or take the time. But if underneath we're just doing it because this way I can do more for other people, then it doesn't work. And that's what leads to burnout. And eventually what leads to suicide in people who work in higher stress jobs.
And so much of that, I should practice self-care. And then for our ADHD brains that run at 100 miles an hour all the time, we're sitting in the bath or we're having a massage or we're meditating, and our brains are like going through our mental to-do list of I'm being lazy because I'm doing this. So like when we're taking that time to care for ourselves, we're not really allowing ourselves to rest because we are our worst enemy. And sometimes we're like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be resting. We shouldn't be resting. We haven't earned the rest. And it's like, we are jerks to ourselves in a lot of ways. And I think the Joy First mission and focusing on making joy a priority and partnering that with like making yourself a priority as entrepreneurs, as women, as people that are in caring professions, it's so hard to not do like, oh, but if I do this, somebody's waiting on something from me. I can help somebody else if I do this now versus I can do all those other things better if I take time to truly rest and take care of myself. So yeah, it's the helping profession is a blessing, but also can be a heavy weight if we don't shift our focus. And that's why like this is such a meaningful thing for us to be talking about, to help people shift their perspective and shift what the goals are and what the goals look like.
Let's talk about so there's mission first and then there's joy first. And so let's talk a little bit about what joy first actually means, right? So joy first is where, first of all, I think it's an awareness practice. It's practicing awareness around where is joy and where is it not? Just starting to look, does this thing that I'm doing bringing me joy? And sometimes bringing someone else joy is cool too, right? Because we get joy from that. But I mean, is doing more paperwork and working late actually bringing someone else joy? No, probably not. Like really paying attention to what brings me joy, having to notice where am I not having joy too, right? This awareness practice of where is it not at? And you even said something like, you even use the language, if I do this more, I can do this other stuff for other people. And that is true. So from a joy first perspective, if we're giving from a place of fullness and expansion and joy, it's almost like boundless that we can give, boundless generosity we have, because we're coming from a place that feels truly grounded and caring from here and not from a place of obligation, not from a place like for me, from atonement. I feel like I had to atone for what I had done in the military. A place of obligation, a place of all of that, that's not sustainable. And so if we can shift to joy, then we can actually give more. But the whole point is, first, to break all this other stuff down is like, just because I effing deserve as a human to experience joy, it's the most beautiful expression of being alive there is. And why the hell are we not talking about it more?
Yeah, and we live in a world where there's so much busy and so much input and information coming into our brains. Like, and when you weave the finances in there too, a lot of people, you see somebody getting a new car or a new house, and that really has people doubling down on the hustle culture. But that shift to joy first, and I'm not. I think the phrase like you can't pour from an empty cup is a little overused. But I think it really resonates because when you're focusing on joy and building a life, and for entrepreneurs, a business around the things that make you happy and setting yourself up for success, you're never going to have every day where you're just like full of joy all the time. There's still going to be ups and downs, but by prioritizing it, it allows you to just show up for yourself and for others at a different level where you're not pushing and running on empty.
Yes.
So how has Joy First shifted your to-do list or and I think you touched on this before, that you've changed the name of your to-do list, which I really love. And I did go and update my list. So tell us a little bit more about that and how joy comes into the things that you need and have to do as an entrepreneur.
So trying to think like linearly here, if this works, maybe I'll start to weave in some of this goal stuff because it really shows up mostly there. But
Yeah,
for
of course.
example, so instead of calling it a task list or a to-do list, I call it an action list, or specifically for me and what we're going to talk about, I call it a sacred action list. Like the main things that I want to get done, they're actually sacred actions. And the difference in the language there is like, look at the energy. The energy from I got to get this done, which for ADHD brains especially is like a task is something that has to be completed, which is very difficult because when you have to complete something, sometimes like you think I'm going to have to take 5 hours to complete this, as opposed to I could just work on it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes today, right? So having an action list is very different. And then that the sacred actions will kind of tie back more into like how I even design my plan and where that's coming from. And so everything is coming from this lens of what supports my joy, right? What supports my action to joy. You've asked shifts that I noticed. Some have been something as big as like completely changing the boundaries that I set for family when they visited for Christmas. That shifted my entire family holiday experience. And it was profound. And everything that I did during that week was very focused on what is going to bring me joy or not, what is best for me. And I think some of this is like listening a lot more to our bodies and what our bodies need. Like, what do we really need in here? And I might have to give up time with this one person. But overall, if that's better for me, then that's what it is, right? It's like shifting from obligation. And a lot of people will say, well, that's just good boundaries and that's just whatever. And yeah, maybe. But if you've been in a mission first mindset for a very long time, and I'm a clinician, I know boundaries, I know all these things. But if my brain is focused on selfless service and atoning, then it was really hard to implement those. There was always this conflict until I started really focusing every day on that.
Again, it comes down to the obligations, but I think one of the things that comes up too that popped into my mind when you were talking is trusting in yourself. And I think especially as late diagnosed woman with ADHD, that trusting in yourself is
Mm-hmm.
really hard because we've had so many things as inputs into our lives, whether from others or from our own asshole brains telling us we're not
Mm-hmm.
good enough. We haven't done the things. We didn't do
Mm-hmm.
this right. We forgot to do this, and just
Right.
beating ourselves
Right.
up. And I think for me that leads to a lack of
Mm-hmm.
self-trust. And then, whoa, I shouldn't be responsible to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what I should and need to do. I need to listen to others for that so really developing that trust in here's
Mm-hmm.
the things that I want to do. I think there's always things that you need to do still too, right? But finding ways to weave joy
Oh, yeah.
into the things that you need to do as well, and just shifting that perspective. Like, it's probably going to be past tax time or like mid tax time by the time this episode is published, but I just did my taxes last week, and it's one of those things that's often we have to, but weaving some of the
Mm-hmm.
money strategies in there, especially for entrepreneurs, with saving, putting money aside, and then your plan having a little bit extra getting put aside, and that, okay, but if I do my taxes, I know exactly how much I owe, and then there could be this financial bonus or windfall for doing that. So it's like finding those things that can make
Mm-hmm.
tasks that you
Mm-hmm.
need to do, you have to do, but shifting them just a little bit can really
Mm-hmm.
change how you feel about doing that task, which can reduce some of the friction to getting it started and, of course, complete it.
Yes. And that is a great lead in to this next piece, because there's something that happened for me around my North Star goal. And I realized the language that I put in there was super helpful. So if you don't mind, I'll move to that. We can always come back around to joy.
Can you start off by sharing, like, what is a North Star
Mm-hmm.
goal?
So a North Star goal is basically the goal for the year. And we get to it through a series of steps. So I'm going to back out a little bit further here. One of the systems that I use is derived from this thing called the 12-week year that an organization I get coached by took and tweaked for their own, and then I've taken it and tweaked it for ADHD folks, including myself. So, but what's beautiful about just the structure of it is we start out with like larger vision. And so the vision work I do is like 25-year, 10-year, 5-year, and then the 1-year North Star goal. But the vision work is on like 8 parameters, right? 8 areas, like your relationship, your vocation, your creativity, your mental health, your finances, your connections, rejuvenation, like all the things. We get really, really, really clear on what I want stuff to look like here, and then 10 years, and then now. So you're getting a more whole person, like the whole piece. We're not just doing finances. We're not just doing work. So when you create your North Star goal, there's going to be multiple elements from these larger goals wrapped up in there, right, for the year. So it's very targeted. And the other cool thing about it is that there's always like, we call them constraints that are woven in there. So I might want to do X, Y, Z by the end of the year while still doing these other things, right? So they don't drop off my focus. So I'm going to give you an older North Star goal before I understand joy first, and then tell you what was wrong with it for me.
I'm excited to hear
and
this.
I was going to, well, it was, if I can remember, I won't completely give it verbatim, but it was basically, I was going to create trainings, writing, speak, this whole basically offering around moral injury for clinicians and chaplains that was nationally known by the end of this one specific year. It was massive. And while doing stuff with my husband on like the weekly, the quarterly, saving X amount of money and going on some massive trip, right? That sounds like a normal goal people would have, right? I'm going to do all these things, and then I'm going to still try to do these things, and that still has to happen, and we'll go. That was not joy first, because what happened was I did the first stuff, but all the while, like be with my husband, do stuff with him, do stuff with friends, train for this thing, didn't happen because that's not how my brain works. And that's not how that mission first programming works. I put the mission first. And so because the mission went first, that's what happens. And when everything has got stressful, everything else, like my self-care, relationship, dropped. So joy first, switched it. And now it is, I'm going to live an 80% joy-driven life that supports my relationship, my creativity, my moral injury work, and my spirituality while maintaining X amount of income by the end of 2026. You see the difference? When I told my coach this, I was a little worried because this was in like a group. And this is a group of people who are very goal focused. Like we were doing these things, and to be like, I'm kind of tossing goals out, but not really, right? So to put this 80% joy driven life, what did I do right there? I took out the perfectionism. No effing way am I living 100%. So I'm going to go ahead and build it into the goal, right? 80% joy driven life. And then that supports these things. And so they keep them in my top of my mind, my relationship, my spirituality, my creativity, my moral injury work. And then there's this baseline business, because I do want to build my business. But when I'm trying to do these things, I'm not going to keep it top of mind all the time. So as long as I'm least maintaining, that's cool for this year, right? So what's really interesting is if I do all the other things, the business is absolutely going to grow. Yeah. So what I wanted to bring up about the word support and what I realized the other day financially, and this to me was super cool, was I was noticing that I kept putting a certain action on my weekly sacred action list, and I wasn't doing it. And I thought about it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, it's because I've been doing these other actions that are also important that I was always having to do in the morning because I used to struggle doing them, right? Well, I've gotten good at those now, and I can take that back, and now I can put this financial action in the front and do it. And I thought about it from this actually supports my relationship, my creativity. Even though it's financial, it's supporting all of these things, right? And Cher, I was so excited. Like I sat down to do it after I did my writing, which is always my first thing. And I was excited to do it. I was excited to do these claims that I hadn't done for forever. And it felt like, yay, I get to do these. But I could not have talked myself into that. It had to come from this different internal space.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think shifting the timing of things too, like that was really an aha moment for me, because we have different levels of energy at different times of the day. And for me, later in the evening, that's when, if I'm doing something work wise or something that's not like downtime, it needs to be really low effort for me. I can't be doing those thinking creativity tasks at that time because my
Mm-hmm.
creativity cup
Mm-hmm.
is empty.
Mm-hmm.
And and
Yes.
it's not not joyful to have very clear things that you want to achieve with your business and with your business income specifically, because that adds so much to, okay, if I hit this income goal in my business, I can do these things. I get to do these things. And I take some time every morning also
Mm-hmm.
writing, journaling. And when I'm writing down the goals and the
Mm-hmm.
things that I want to accomplish, because I think that's very powerful too, to take time to write down the things that you want to achieve.
Yes.
And I love the shift of writing them down in
Yes.
a way that
Yes.
you've already achieved them, which is very powerful. And around my income goals, I
Mm.
started writing like, I earn X in my business, and that allows me to, or allows
Mm-hmm.
us to, as a household. And it's just, it really brings in that
Mm-hmm.
it's not icky or gross as a helper profession to want to have income goals in
Mm-mm.
your business. And looking at it as like, how can that
No.
positively
No.
impact my life overall, has been a really powerful connection for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So something I want to kind of, let's go into this kind of planning piece, because this is where this ties us in, right? Because I don't want anyone to get the idea that's like, well, we're not going to do these things. This is more about doing things differently and more sustainably and being more agile, because my favorite word now is agile, right? Not flexible, because flexible can bring up for people, I'm being flexible for somebody else, right? Or I got to change for some, no, I'm being agile in my own self. So with this 12-week year system, the cool things about it are what we're doing is we're keeping our focus in smaller chunks, right? So yeah, I have this long, this big year goal. What the heck does that mean, right? So I break it down into 12-week chunks. And by breaking things into 12 weeks, we have urgency, right? Like I'm just focused on this quarter to get things done, which is great. It provides clarity. So you come up with a couple of period goals, right? And then you come up with tactics, action steps to get there. And you come up with dates for them, right? I added in values, to put in there too. So you can actually be tying your action steps to the values to keep that top of mind. So you're not like, I'm just doing this thing because I put it down, but because it freaking matters for this reason. So these pieces are helpful, right? It's focused on actions and process, not outcomes, right? And even says like, we can't manage outcomes, we can manage the actions we take that can lead to the outcomes. So it focuses on that, which is great. It measures, because if we're not measuring what we're doing, then we don't know if we're moving, right? And we can't see, where do we need to switch? Where do we need to adjust? And then it talks about time use. So this is where I diverge from this piece, or where I've added to, if you will, and how joy, I was doing this anyway, but then joy has kind of come in here more, is looking at taking time management kind of off the table and focusing on energy management, right? Focusing on, when you look at planning your week or your month, even like what I did not do in November was look at, could I do these things? Yes. But what was the cost? Because there is a massive emotional load, to speaking for me about moral injury. There's an emotional load when I see clients as a clinician. There's a high executive functional load when I'm writing or creating, right? So if as ADHD individuals were not paying attention to the energy management, the emotional load, the executive functioning weight, and then just life in general, all the time management in the world is not going to do us a damn bit of good. So building in, as we put together our quarter and then our weeks, is building in these other ways of seeing, what's my energy going to be like? What are the best days for me to do X, Y, and Z? And then every week is an experiment in how that went.
I like that, how that every week is an experiment, because we tend to want to do things perfectly. And I love how your focus is like that 80% joy, because we tend to have those all or nothing mindsets. And I love that 80% versus perfection that you're talking about, like that 80% joy, because we tend to want to do things perfectly and put pressure on ourselves to not do anything at less than 100%, which is not realistic or achievable. And I think that really helps to shift the focus and shift some of the barriers that allow us to do things that have a significant impact. And you touched on this earlier too, that focus on the actions that we can do that impact our goals, because that perfection also tends to come in when we're looking at our results. And there is so much in life that is not within our control, and shifting the focus to what actions are most likely to get me to my goals, and what results do I want them to have, but like just doing the things that you are taking action on and tracking the actions. And yes, we need to track things like our income goals as well, but putting less pressure on them and more focus on, am I taking actions that are aligned with the things that I want to do, and really weaving in that goal piece into it as well. And you talked before about time versus energy, which I love, because there's, again, so much social pressure on tracking time, but tracking that energy and that the less than perfect goals, I think, allows us to come at it with more energy on a regular basis.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is like this whole thing has been a process of like understanding like how deeply ingrained this time management, mission first, obligation mindset is. So like, even though I made this North Star goal of, okay, 80%, right? And then even in my quarter goal, I put 80% of these certain things. I still caught when I did my weekly sacred action things, there's certain things on there like, I want to write an hour a day. I want to do all these things. On my card, there was no 80% built in. So it took me a few weeks to be like, oh, I'm actually still saying I'm going to write an hour a day. And in order for me to check that off as done, I have to have done it every day. And so I had to change the language to my goal here is 80% of writing an hour every day, which would look like 5 days a week instead of 7. So I started kind of bringing in this thing of soft versus hard targets, right? Like my hard target is the 5, but if I do 7, that's freaking great. The example here is that it is so deeply ingrained, and this is why this is an awareness practice. And by practice, I mean, it's consistently, there's no one and done. I have to keep looking and seeing and finding, where is this built in? It's like, you know, having a little magnifying glass, trying to find out where the last little bits of whatever were left. And oh, it's still here. How do we shift that? And it's no judgment. It's just like, okay, I need to shift that too, right? And just like keep moving the needle forward. And that's super amazing. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier around how a lot of times we can want to do all the things. Is the ADHD brain is just like, one, it's fun, right? So it might feel not joyful to be like, what do you mean I can't do all the things? And if we think more about what is sustainable and how do we really want to show up for ourselves long term and for our families, then there is this sense of, I still have to dial it back some. And that's been hard for me because I love doing what I do. And I have to be like, it's okay. It's okay if I only do X amount of things this month, because all these things that I've said will be here are so important to me. I really want to be able to show up for them. It can all be there, right? So it really is about being more fluid and more agile about how we do stuff.
Yeah, I like the agile part, because I think the visual that gives me is just really impactful too. And the agile versus flexible, you're right. Flexible is like, what can I do to bend myself to other people? And the agile is like, how can I creatively do the things that I want to do? Something that pops up in my brain about agile too is like, how can I do something that has a big impact in a way that's less of my energy?
Yeah, absolutely. This is why I like the energy blocks versus the time blocks, and just the shifting. If I can just do this for, this energy time, actually have rested more. What's been interesting is as I've gone through this process and I'm listening more to my body, I'm noticing it actually wants to take a nap. My mission first brain was like, you can't take naps. But what I'm noticing is if I take the 20-minute nap, and I'm grateful that I have the chance to do that, but I then somehow have more energy. Imagine that to do the stuff I need to do. So it still works, but the trust, it takes time to build this in. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about just like, okay, what is it? Joy? Like, what is that? What is that? How do we even nourish that? How do we bring it in? How do we start? And, one way to start is I actually came up with these joy prompts that I sent to some clients because people are like, I don't know if I actually know what joy is, right? And so prompts can be like, how do you know if you've actually experienced joy? When's the last time you remember experiencing it? What does it feel like? Is it exuberant? Is it bubbly and fizzy in your body? Is it like a full belly laugh or just a sense of quiet joy? If you think of joy as an action verb, what actions would you take? And what would it look like to protect your joy?
I love that. And yeah, joy can look very differently for different people. And it can look very differently for each individual based on the time of day, the time in your life, what you're doing. Like joy can be you're spending time with someone you care about or a group of friends and you've got a big belly laugh and you're laughing so much your eyes are watering. Or it can also be really quiet too. It can be you're sitting with a coffee and you're reading a book or just like taking some quiet time. Like joy really has a really wide spectrum of what that looks like. And I always love how do you picture something in your mind? A recent example was I saw a couple talking about how they pictured the months of the year if they were visualizing it, and they both had wildly different examples. And I think this can be true for joy too. Is like, how do you picture joy? And what does that look like or feel like? And that's something that's probably going to be so different for everybody because our brains are so amazing. And that calendar example was like, it's a calendar. How can it look so visually different for two people? And you just start to get little peeks into people's heads. And I love those conversations. We are so glad you've been here. And I want to leave one parting question is, what is the biggest impact that you've seen in your life or in your business or both that shifting from mission first to joy first has had?
Wow. I like trying to think of the most succinct way to say something like that because it actually is so big. I think I feel like my life is more sustainable. And I've also realized that I've always been very joyful, but because of my programming, this mission first, because of moral injury, every time it would bubble up, it would get smacked back down because it wasn't okay. And so I feel like I actually live more authentically and more genuinely. I've been able to create space internally, which then helps me create space externally. And there's just like this ease that's shown up in my life by living this way. It's not easy. I want to be clear. It's a very radical shift. But if there was one thing I wanted to leave like this conversation with, it's that just honoring the fact that right now things are very, very hard. And people might be like, how can I have joy in the midst of everything? And I would say it is vital that we try to have joy right now. That's what sustains us. That's what helps us through this. And so wherever we can tap into that, that's what gives us hope. And that's what can keep us and help us continue to show up in the ways that are important to us. It gives me more energy to continue doing the work that I want to do and being there in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that in because it's really important to address when somebody might be listening to this shortly after it's published and thinking, how the fuck can I have joy in a world that is doing everything it can to suck the joy out of me? And I think joy and rage can coexist. It's like that joy is like taking care of yourself, and that rage towards the things that are going on. And then again, doing what you can do to change the things that you believe strongly in and want to change, because you can't flip a switch and change some of these giant things that are wrong with the world today, but you can have a small impact, and multiple small impacts are the way that we get change. And also it's like, you can't do that without taking care of yourself. Yeah.
Yes,
That was
absolutely.
such an insightful way to wrap the conversation, because there's probably we're a lot of people listening going, I feel very conflicted. I'm getting ripped in half with wanting joy, but also wanting to have an impact on what's happening in the world right now and being part of the change. And they can coexist, and they really do need to coexist. So I am grateful to have you here again with us, Julie, and I will share the details for anybody who wants to connect with you and reach out and maybe explore options to getting your support, just learning more about who you are and what you do. And I can't wait to probably have you back again the next time we've got another topic that really is impactful, because I love the aspect that you bring to these conversations. So thanks for being here again on the Mind and Money podcast. And we hope you, Julie, and everybody that's listening has a wonderful day.
Thanks, Sherry.